This is Lyle Hanna. We are delighted that you're here to join us today. This is the 35th meeting that we've had on crisis management, HR crisis management for COVID-19. And we've been delighted to have so many of you join us throughout the past year. Maybe March 23rd is the actual date, but this was close to it. So we decided we'd call this our anniversary meeting. And I think we've got a terrific meeting lined up for you today. We've got the normal cast is back. Jim has a whole lot of things to share with you. Brad and Troy are going to be color commentary on some things. Allison and Autumn have lined up some work that they're going to share with you on what's going on in Kentucky and how are we doing on vaccines and so forth. So, and then we're going to wrap up the session hearing from two special guests about what's going on in their organizations. I think you've heard of both of these organizations. One of them is Keeneland and the other one is Rupp Arena. And we thought it'd be fun to hear how they're working to put things back together so they can host all of us this spring or this summer. Let's roll on to the next slide and get things going. Thank you for joining us. Please put your questions in the chat box. I see some people already putting some notes down there. That's great. And at the end of the time, we will open the floor up for questions and even let everybody speak to us if you want. If you want to get to know us better or share thoughts you've got, please stay on through the end of the call. So let me roll it over to Autumn and Allison, and they've got some things to share with us. Thank you.
Yeah, so last session, I shared with you all the update on the maps and where the rates are falling. So we have some great news. You can see the maps are lightening up a lot now. Last time I shared, there was 30 still in the red. This week, there's only 8. One of those counties is Lyon County on the west side here. It's really high right now because of a breakout in a COVID breakout in the prisons, unfortunately. But outside of that, we actually have 2 in the green, which we haven't seen yet in the far west side. Fayette and Jefferson are now in the orange, which is exciting. And we now have 48 counties in the yellow when we only had 18 of last week. So some great progress, some exciting news, especially for businesses right now.
The only other thing, Autumn, I wanted to share with everybody is if you look at this 2 months worth, we had 1 orange county on January 18th. And now we have 8 red counties. And so if you look at this progression in a 2-month time period, almost to the day, 60 days, we've gone from all red without any relief at all to basically all orange and yellow and green. So just thought the progression is amazing to see. Yeah. Lyle and Autumn and Allison, all of you.
Yep.
All right. I think Jim's going to take over next.
All right. So that's me. All right. So here we go. First of all, I wanted to ask, and we didn't get the polls up, I don't think, in time, but in the chat room, I wanted to find out, since I didn't get the polls submitted in time for anybody to do.
Oh, here they come.
Oh, wait. Oh, there he is. Hey, look at that. I wanted to ask this because, again, and let me go back to the beginning of this. If you look, this is our 1 year. 1 year ago today is when I talked to Lyle about an idea I had about trying to help organizations and the type of things I had been doing. And when this all came out, I had no clue that we were doing more than one-time meeting, and it turned into now 35 meetings over a 1 year period. So I just wanted to find out what everybody's answer is to this and see how many people have come to things. So this is a little different from, you know, I don't normally do a whole lot of polls, but we'll give you a few more minutes to, or a few more seconds to answer that. It's just amazing to me to see that we've been doing this for a year. That a year ago today was I didn't have anywhere to go, number one, because I couldn't fly. If you haven't, if I've never told you on this webinar before, I used to fly for companies that I represent. I was flying basically 4 or 5 times a week. So you all gave me something to look forward to every week or every other week for me to do, because I no longer was going to Georgia, DC, Texas, Minnesota, Chicago, all these different places. So it's been really fun to be able to share with you the ability to talk things through, hear what your concerns are. And honestly, if I can just say, I think it's made me more laser focused for the organizations that I'm helping. So it's been really good for me as well. So it's kind of been all around awesome for everybody in terms of doing this, not why we're here. So, okay, we'll pop this up. Look at that. 51% have been to 75% or more of these meetings.
Woo! That's pretty good.
Then we have 27% coming to most. 3%, this is your first one. Oh, wow. So if this is your first one, I'm sorry, you're not going to get the vintage me, because everybody knows me by now. So there's no need to be sarcastical at this point. Actually, that's all I am. So the funny thing was, last night when I was realizing that this was the time period, I went back and looked at the very first one, and seeing how many glitches we had and how we were trying to pass the baton from person to person. And it's just funny to see the progression of this and how much more professional it's become from a production standpoint, because we all kind of know what we're doing now, and this is just kind of the same thing that we're used to doing. So if you really want to kind of go back and laugh at why you came to the first one, not laugh as in it's funny, but just the way that we tried to put this together so quickly. We'd never met each other. We were all in different places. We're a lot smoother now than we were then. So I don't know if that's saying much, but anyway. So, all right, this is where we are. I put it on the screen because I wanted you to see where we are in terms of the COVID vaccine in Kentucky. You're going to hear some discussion at the end of the presentation today from Keeneland and the Lexington Center about what they're doing in terms of trying to open things up in the spring. Officially, we are in 1C. I have an employee for one of the organizations I'm involved in Pennsylvania who told me this morning that they are still in 1A. And it's very frustrating because she's supposed to be one of the ones that I travel with and that I meet with on a regular basis. And she said she literally cannot travel until she gets the vaccine, and she is still a couple of months away from being eligible for the vaccine. So as much as you've heard me complain in the past about what is going on in Kentucky and some of the frustrations that we've had, there are a whole lot worse locations. Now, I will tell you, other locations are opening up on Monday to anyone above the age of 16 is eligible for shots. So we're still behind some of the other states, but we are in phase 1C. And actually, I believe, since this hasn't been updated since March the 1st, I believe we're at the very end. I actually predicted last night that if it's not announced today, I believe they'll be announcing by Wednesday that they're going into phase 2, because I think they're running out of people that need the vaccines. They're now advertising that you can go get them on 24-hour notice and things like that. So stay tuned for that. Here's a vaccine update. In Kentucky, there are 4.468 million people. How do I know that? Because I have Google. There are 18% under the age of 16. That's important because right now the vaccine has not been approved for children under the age of 16. It leaves 3.2 million people eligible for the vaccine. Total number of Kentuckians that have been vaccinated with at least one shot, 995,784. total vaccines that have been administered as of Friday. Now this has a lag time. 1.123 million total vaccines that have been administered. There's another chart that shows that we've actually distributed more vaccines than have been administered, but that's because there are two doses. So right now we are at about a 97–98% of vaccine distribution that is eligible, because just because it says it's been allocated to us does not mean it's been received. So this is updated on Tuesdays for receipt of the weekly allocation. These numbers are updated daily on the right-hand side. So what does that mean? 31% have been vaccinated. If you look at the population breakdown, that means we shouldn't really be in 1C anymore. We need to go to level 2, which basically means anyone over the age of 40 and 1A, B, C. So it's getting ready to expand to the over 40 any day now. I would suspect you'll hear about it as soon as we get the Tuesday allocation of shots or vaccines from the federal government, or perhaps today at the announcements because of the weekend distribution. So that's your vaccine update. We'll hear a little bit more going into the individual end of the presentation with Keeneland and Lexington Center. So here's another
quickie survey.
Yep, another survey up on the screen. How many vaccines have you gotten? One or more? Working on it? Not interested? Or could have put another one up there, which is scheduled. A lot of people are scheduled right now that have not yet gotten it.
Well, we'll put that in the I'm working on it category, Jim. If you've scheduled it, it's the I'm working on it.
Chase is the one doing the surveys. Wait till you get to the next one. It's got a math problem in it, right, Chase?
I don't think so.
So the vaccines, they're coming. If you're going to want one, the announcement from the 1-year anniversary from the president's office was every adult will be able to receive it by the end of May. I actually think that it was already rolling out at a pace that's probably it may be on task, maybe a little slow, because I think that everyone that wants one will probably be able to get it by the end of April. There's now 3 different vaccines. I'm not covering the Johnson & Johnson today. I already covered it last time. But you have 3 different vaccines that are all approved that are now rolling out millions of doses each. I think that you're going to see some advancements on that as we go through. All right, you ready to pop that one up? Let's see what everybody has to say.
Wow, 48%.
That's what I was saying is vast majority of people. Now we have a lot of people on here that are essential worker or their business does essential worker. And then you also have people that are on here that are above the age of 60. You fall into some of these categories, health issues and so on. The other interesting number for me is that 24% are not interested at all. Doesn't surprise me. That's kind of where the national average is right now. So here we go. I'm going to give you a Kentucky update. I'm going to give you a national update. And I'm going to tell you what I have no clue about, because things are bouncing around like crazy today. Today is a deadline on a lot of different things. But let's start with what affects you directly. So I've talked to you before about it. I'm not going to waste a lot of time giving the history. If you are aware, Kentucky had a whole lot of new laws that were adopted that basically said the governor's authority is being removed. Those laws were adopted in February. On February 2nd, the veto was overridden, became law. On the 3rd, there was a hearing in front of Judge Shepard in Franklin Circuit Court. Judge Shepard is going to be losing a tremendous amount of his authority because of another law that was entered that basically said Frankfurt is no longer a super court. What that means is up until this new law on February, I think it was the 25th, up until the new law was entered, Anything that you wanted to challenge with the state had to go to Frankfurt. We only have 2 judges in Frankfurt. Made those judges super important because they became basically the controller as to what's legal and what's not. They created a tremendous amount of problems for the previous governor because they basically said that Republican governor had no authority. Then they came in and started saying that the Democratic governor has tremendous authority. They're supposed to be non-political, but there were questions raised as to some of the political leanings of some of the judges or some of the decisions in Frankfurt. They've changed that. They've now said you can go to any county where there's a dispute and you can file it wherever you live, where the company resides, or where the dispute arose. That's a huge change. This one was brought by the governor in Frankfurt in front of a judge that has been pretty supportive of what he's done, and he entered an injunction. Then they had a hearing on the 23rd of February, and he extended his injunction for 10 days to March 3rd. Well, on March 3rd, 3 different laws were partially shot down by the Franklin Circuit Court judge. What he held was the court enjoins the implementation of Section 1 of House Bill 1, i.e., that was the, what did I call it? I'm sorry, I've gone blank. That was basically create your own rules. You could go to the CDC, you could go to the federal government rules, you could go to the state rules, you could find your own, and you didn't have to listen to an emergency order of the governor. If you wanted to shut down your open your operations, even though there was a shutdown order from the governor, you had the authority to do that. Well, I kind of hinted before that ever got there that I thought that that was a little overreach from the legislature, because basically what it said is, hey, everybody just go do your own thing. You can follow CDC guidelines, you can follow anything else. Well, the CDC, the governor's office was smart. They got a letter written by the CDC, and the CDC said, whoa, hold on. All we are is guidelines. We don't issue regulations. We don't issue mandates, which is not true, because then they did for people flying internationally and some of the other things. But, and we'll get to a little bit of that in a minute. They basically said, hey, all we're doing is giving you best practices so you can't follow us as a law. Well, the governor used that. The judge agreed. So the first one on there you all already knew about. We talked about it because that was issued back on February 3rd in House Bill 1, that what he called private attorney general laws were not effective under our Constitution, so everybody couldn't create their own rules and enforce them and ignore our governor. The second and third one are a little bit more dicey, and I'm not sure that these will survive on appeal. That's just my legal opinion, and legal opinions are like other things. Everybody has one. So the second one is the 30-day limitation on executive orders issued under 39A. The court came out and said that that's not a proper limitation. I tend to disagree, because the Supreme Court, if you remember back in September, they had oral argument. They issued an opinion in October, and what did they tell us? And what did I talk to you about? That, hey, legislature, this is of your own making because you made the governor king. You literally said he could make the laws, he could enforce the laws, he could interpret the laws under a pandemic. So it's your own fault. If you don't like it, change it. So what did they do? They said, look, any emergency order issued by a governor means it's an emergency. You can only keep those in place for 30 days. The only way they can continue after 30 days is call the legislature into session, because they're the ones that make the laws. You have to execute on those as a governor. That's why you're the executive branch. We legislate, you execute. Well, that got thrown out in terms of the 30-day limitation on emergency orders issued, absent legislative ratification. The judge said that that's illegal. So Senate Bill 1, to the extent it says 30-day limitation, has been enjoined. The last one is the 30-day limitation on emergency administrative regulations. Those are things that the governor does that are not law, not emergency orders, but that he or someone under the executive branch issues based upon an emergency called E-regs. He did that for expanding unemployment. He did that for some of the other things that went on, and the court has held that that too was a 30-day limitation, or that 30-day limitation is as well illegal. I predicted this would happen. I predicted the day it would happen because I think I told you that the legislature is running out of days available. I thought that these were a little bit sloppy in the way that they were written, and I predicted that this judge would issue an injunction at the very end of the legislative period so that he could potentially not have the legislature set aside. That's what he did. He went as long as he could because he only had 30 days from when it was filed. So it was filed on March 2nd. He issued it on February 2nd. He issued it literally at the end of his time period. So he's issued this injunction, said that it's illegal. It's now basically ready to be sent up on appeal. You're going to hear a lot from the Court of Appeals and then the Supreme Court. They may try to fast track it to the Supreme Court since it's an issue that has emergency implications. So with the last part of this, on March 11th, the House did go ahead and vote to ratify all of the governor's, not all, about 60 of the governor's orders, to ratify those because they were set to expire if they, under the old law, if they didn't vote to ratify. So they went ahead and did that. I'm not sure that it took effect because there's an injunction in place, but they're acting as if the injunction is going to be set aside. And what they're doing is they're showing that they're going to be a rational body reviewing executive orders so that the judge should get out of the middle of it. So this is going to come down to the Court of Appeals and Supreme Court. They're going to be the ones to parse this out. Attorney General is probably going to file an appeal. I've been shocked that there has been no appeal filed yet. The legislature is probably going to file an appeal. I've been shocked they haven't filed one yet, but as of last night, it had not yet happened. So if we have another poll, you can throw one up there and we'll go on to the next one. Do we have one?
No.
No? Okay, I got a text that said we had one. Sorry, I thought we had one that you were asking to throw up there. I'll keep rolling. All right, so legislation update. These are the things that we talked about some. I want you all to be aware of where we stand. So basically what this is, the top three, Senate Bill 3, 7, House Bill 6. These have been overridden vetoes or they were signed into law. So the first one, Senate Bill 3, removed the Agriculture Development Board and Finance Corporation, also disbanded the Tobacco Settlement Fund and some other things. The veto was overwritten on the 12th of March. This removed it from the governor's office and placed it under a different branch so that he can't control it anymore. I'm pretty sure there'll be a lawsuit. I don't know what the results will be, but I put that up there because we do have a tremendous number of people impacted by the agriculture, and a lot of your businesses are, from Alltech to Bourbon Industry to Brown-Forman to Buffalo Trace to Keeneland. There's a whole lot of things impacted by the agricultural moves, so stay tuned on that. The next one was signed into law by the governor, which is the very first one he's actually signed. Everything else, that's not true. He did do the pari-mutuel betting as well. This was the second one he signed. The others he just didn't even sign, and they became law, or he vetoed and they were overridden. This one was establishing a fraud prevention effort. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, and also creating an investigation team. A lot of you have asked me, how do we handle the situation where we've had employees that literally have been ignoring efforts to bring them back to work, or they lied on their application, or this person never even worked for me, and yet they claimed they were an independent contractor and they claimed entitlement. Well, this establishes a fraud prevention team, and so if you believe that there's been fraud, start reporting it. They're supposed to start looking into it. It should have been done a year ago. It's part of the reason why the legislature said We should have been brought into session, but the governor didn't want to do it because he knew he would lose some of his control. We needed laws created, and we shouldn't have had to wait a year to have a fraud prevention effort brought in for unemployment fraud that was been rampant for a year. But that's where we are. The last one, House Bill 6, is a set of a lot that are getting ready to dump today and then be vetoed and then reopened at the end of this month. If you weren't on the webinar where we talked about the veto calendar, let me pull that down so you guys can see it, because it's really kind of Kentucky has a really bizarre way of doing things. So this is Kentucky's calendar. They can only be in session, this is a short session, they can only be in session for 30 days. They started on part 2, day 9. Day 1 isn't even on here anymore. Part 2 started February 2nd. Part 1 started January 4th. They're only in session for 30 days, but they managed to stretch this session out to the last day in March, or next to last day. They built into their calendar veto days, which means they are not in session, nobody does anything, and the reason why they do that, because they know he's going to veto everything that passes his desk, or almost everything. And they have a complete veto-proof majority in both the House and the Senate. So they're putting in concurrence days, which are today and tomorrow. That's to clean up any of the bills that went back and forth between the House and the Senate to make sure they are unanimous in their, they have uniformity in the bills, make sure they're perfectly the same, and then they get signed by the President of the Senate or the Speaker of the House. They get sent to the governor. He has 10 days to veto, including Saturdays. They built that in, they come back, they have 2 days to override his veto and close down the session. So that's where we are. We are right here on the first day of concurrence. Tomorrow we're gonna get a whole bunch more dumped in. Then the vetoes will all happen on the very last day. They will then set aside all the vetoes. So what does that mean? For businesses, these are the ones that it means down here. I've put 2 of them in here. There's a whole lot more. There are some that impact the distilleries. You will be allowed to direct distill or direct sale, which you've been precluded in a lot of instances in the past. You also are going to be allowed to sell to-go drinks with meals if you run a restaurant, and that's been passed as well. It has not yet been signed. I don't think some of these are going to be vetoed. I think some of these will be agreed to. So the first one, this is critical for anyone that runs a business. You can no longer treat adoption different from anyone who's having a child, natural birth. So you have to build your policies and change your policies. You need to get with an expert to do that, because now adoption is the same as a regular. This is awaiting delivery or awaiting signature of the governor. This one should have been delivered this morning. House signed it, Speaker. The Senate did not. Supposed to be signed this morning and delivered. I expect him to sign that. I would be embarrassed if he literally did not, because this passed both the House and the Senate without a dissenting vote. It was unanimous, Republican and Democrat and Independent. No one voted against it. The next one is just common sense, and this is for anybody that received the PPP loans. Under state law, unless this law was adopted, you would have been taxed because it is money you received. This allowed you to be treated exactly the same in federal and state. So whatever your tax treatment is in federal, you'll receive the same tax treatment for your loan. So that's the update on Kentucky. Now the important one that I really don't know what to tell you about. I put a pretty graph up here. Thank you, Wall Street Journal. This is the main money. So you have stimulus checks. Don't get excited yet, because there's a big change that may impact a lot of you on the stimulus checks. So number one, stimulus checks, $410 billion. The next biggest part of this COVID is the one that frustrates me. It's the reason why it never got adopted when the Republicans were in charge. And it is disappointing because it is not COVID related. $360 billion of the $1.9 or $1.9 trillion. So little more than 1/4 of the total amount goes to government. What does that mean? It is your SALT, state and local tax, your state and local government. Literally what this is a 100% bailout of Chicago, Illinois, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Detroit. I think there were a few others in there, but it's literally giving them free money, and it's all pre-COVID because they were in financial straits. They did not run their pensions correctly, and you'll see pensions are up above as well. So this is a big concern because basically what it means is Kentucky has a 100%, we must balance our books in our Constitution. We cannot spend more money than we bring in. That's wise, that's smart, that's the law. We did what we were supposed to, so we will not get any money. California, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Oakland, Chicago, Illinois, they did not balance their books. They ran things at a huge deficit, and now they're getting free money from the federal government, and we're all paying for it. Our tax money for our state goes to pay for them not doing their job for decades. That's the problem. And you'll see a lot of that in here. What frustrates me is the only part of this that is COVID related is COVID response, $123 billion. Extended unemployment benefits, which we're going to talk about here in a minute. Arguably the stimulus checks, which now you could have gotten per person about $4,000 per person, plus the child tax credits that we're going to go through here in a minute, which is another $3,600 or $3,000 per person. Plus this extended unemployment is now going to illegal immigrants and anyone who has made it across the border or is currently coming across the border gets the extended unemployment. They also get the tax credits. They also get the stimulus checks. So what does this mean for the people who are actually impacted? $16 billion for ag, $59 billion for small business administration. Most of this is already tied into the previous, $123 for COVID and the extended unemployment. Everything else on here really honestly is not COVID related. The government, the other, when you see $194 billion of other, what that means is the money that, sorry about that. That's the money that literally goes to all of the other things that they didn't want us to know about. The transportation is to fix the roads and bridges and interstates, has nothing to do with COVID. So there's where we are with what's been passed. The details of it are here. So this was signed, it's called the America Rescue Plan. It's $1.9 trillion. Just in case you ever wanted to know how many zeros that is, this is how many zeros that is. And keep in mind, this is the 6th relief package that we've passed. What does that mean for your business? What does that mean for you individually? It means that our taxes will have to go up because we have no money left in the coffers. So what this means is $300 per week unemployment insurance. I did not put on here the PUA, the PIU, the different types of pandemic extensions, but if you've run out of state, you can get federal. If you have state, you get federal on top of it. This is basically additional money from the federal government on top of any state unemployment. So $300, it was supposed to end today. It now ends on September the 6th. The other thing, and this is important, for almost everyone was on unemployment at one time or another. If you weren't, that's very rare. So back last March and April, a lot of things just shut down and a lot of people went on unemployment. Brand new, the first $10,200 in unemployment benefits is now federally tax-free for anyone earning less than $150,000. Let me repeat that. That's one of the biggest things for individuals on this call. Your first $10,200 will be tax-free for those that earn less than $150,000. So if you received unemployment benefits last year, the first $10,200 is tax-free. Get with your accountant. I'm not a tax specialist. I hate doing my own taxes, so don't ask me any tax questions. You'll see a lot of taxes in here, and I struggled to put it together for you guys because I really don't like it. But I did try to put together the answers the best I could to help you all out. $1,400 stimulus checks. Here's the problem. A lot of people, now you received some in December, you received some last year, so this is additional money on top, this $1,400. However, the phase outs have all changed. So if you thought, woohoo, I qualified before, so I'm gonna get more money, wait, stop, may not get anything. Here's what's happened. Number one, if you got 80,000 before, then you phased out up to 100,000, I believe. They changed that. The only way they could get this through with Senate, some of the senators that were against it, and they have a razor thin margin in the House as well. Oh, a little story too. The only way this whole thing got adopted is that one of the senators' father died in Alaska, and that changed the balance of power sufficiently that the one Democrat that was voting against things no longer had the ability to sway things because one of the Republican senators had to leave to go to his father-in-law's funeral, asked to have them wait, and they said no. So this got adopted on a Saturday with an unbalanced Senate, and that's why a lot of things still got in that wouldn't have otherwise gotten in, but this is one that did get implemented as part of this deal, which was, you got money if you had 80,000 or less before, couples earning 160,000 or less before. Now, it's 75,000. Not only that, but the phase out ends at 80,000. So if you got 80,000 or 100,000 before, and you used to get money under the old stimulus packages, if you make more than $80,000, you're just out of luck. If you as a couple make more than 160, you just lost it all. So they changed it downward, not upward, and they cut it off so that instead of having a gradual, it's only $5,000 difference, then you go to a flat zero. They then included additional $3,000 tax credit for children. It was $2,000, so that was an increase. If your child's under 6, it got increased to $3,600 instead of $3,000. Here's the interesting thing, and I have no clue because asking the IRS to do anything is a joke. I know people that still have not gotten their first stimulus check. So if you've gotten your second and third, I know of people who are working, so they are not unemployed. They have submitted their taxes for last year, and they still have not gotten their first stimulus check, much less their second or third. So this little nugget at the end, periodic basis, for whatever reason, and you talk about they're going to spend more money as a governmental agency doing this than just sending everybody in the world, which is what we're kind of doing anyway, more money. But what they've done is they've decided that people shouldn't get the money for their tax credits for their children all at once. So what they're going to do is they're going to send it out on a periodic basis to offset the costs of having a child during this pandemic. They haven't yet decided, is it monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, or annually? They haven't figured out, or they haven't said how they're going to do this, whether you're going to have to give them your bank account information or whether they're just going to put them in the mail and then we're going to have mail fraud and people stealing them. I looked at that and I just shook my head because we got so many problems in this world and in this country and in the running of our government. To have them say that they're going to mail out these electronic checks on a periodic basis when it's supposed to be a tax credit makes no sense to me. So that's where that is. State and local government bailout, you heard me talk about that. The numbers are a little different. I've seen 350 billion, I've seen 360 billion. What I have seen are the announcements from the mayors in Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Chicago, basically saying we got to get out of jail free card. We just paid off all of our credit cards. We no longer owe anybody anything. Isn't that awesome? I'm like, yeah, I guess if you live there, maybe that's awesome. And maybe you could get things put back together the right way, but for those of us who don't live there, all of our money just went into those cities for them to have the ability to mismanage and run wrong, which is what they've done. That's not a political comment. It's just reality when you see that Los Angeles is $650 million in debt because they didn't balance the books as they're required to under the Constitution. So, all right, so $350 billion for these cities that are in debt. Juxtaposed, my word of the day, to $10 billion for pandemic testing and contact tracing. So let me get this straight. We're going to bail out all of these cities with $350 billion, but if you've heard of anybody that's had COVID, the contact tracing is only like 3 months behind. So they're calling people 3 months later and saying, hey, were you ever around Lyle Hanna because he had COVID 3 months ago? And we're trying to track down who he was around 3 months ago. So we're putting our money for COVID into great things, which is $10 billion total for nationwide contact tracing. So the next one is $20 billion in emergency rentals. Those are for people who can't pay their rent. What they have not done still is they've still not helped anybody who runs a business that owns rental property. You're not getting paid by your renters, and you don't have any employees, so you can't apply for the PPP, and you have no mortgage assistance. Oh, wait, so now they've come up with $10 billion in mortgage and homeowner assistance, but they haven't told us how. But it's ironic that it's 1/2 of the renter, so that if you own a business, if you own a house, you're getting half of the assistance, but they haven't explained how people can get that. So I don't know whether you have to be defaulting on your mortgage or whatever before you even apply. $130 billion for K through 12 reopening, but this is not COVID related. This is literally trying to help them get reopened. $40 billion more for colleges. I think colleges are up to about $180 billion. I think K through 12 is up to about $300 billion from the government so far. $1.25 billion for summer programs, $1.25 program for after-school programs, $3 billion for technical assistance. That's all your education that's been put into this. Again, just my synarchastical commentary of the day. That's 1/3 of the amount going to Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, and Detroit. $86 billion for failing pension bailouts. Interesting thing here is most of your failing pension benefits go to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Chicago, Detroit because they couldn't cover the pensions for the retired employees. So not only are they getting $350 billion, but they're also getting $86 billion on top. Employee retention tax credits have been extended for startups. We're going to talk about that here in just a minute as well. Student loan forgiveness is now tax-free. That's only at the federal, not at the state, so keep that in mind. You can't double dip still. Little interesting thing they've done is COBRA premiums are now extended at 100% from April 1st through September 30th. So if you're on COBRA, it's going to cover 100%. There's some details in there. If that applies to you, go pull that and take a look. $4.5 billion for low-income home energy assistance and $510 million for FEMA assistance for homelessness. $7.25 billion for the SBA and new PPP funding, and $15 billion for the EIDL that we've talked about before. Additional things they have, I don't know what happened to my mouse here. 1 second. There we go. The Act extended tax credits to offset costs for employees who voluntarily provided the FFCRA emergency paid leave. So those credits are now available from April 1st to September 30th. Why April 1st? Well, because the CARES Act extension at the end of the year, or the omnibus spending plan that came out at the end of December, covered through March 31st. So this just says you can continue this. They will continue to cover you. Under the FFCRA, you have credit for 2 additional new things. We've talked about the 6 previously, all the way back to, ironically, March 23rd of last year. We talked about the FFCRA leave. Here are 2 additional ones. One, if an employee is seeking or awaiting the results of a diagnostic test for or medical diagnosis of COVID. So basically, we've had on this webinar, I've been asked probably every other time, what do we do if somebody is waiting for the tests? How do we get this? Is this FFCRA? And if you remember, I kept telling you, technically it's not. And the other thing is that technically, if you don't have the symptoms of COVID and you're allowing this, you may well end up stuck because the federal government hasn't caught up with reality, and you might end up giving leave and then not getting reimbursed from the federal government. They fixed the loophole that I've talked about since April or May of last year, which is basically the results issue or getting tested and awaiting, or not necessarily being on a quarantine, but you're just waiting for the results of a test. It now says you can include that person. Christina, that question was yours on several different occasions, so I hope you're on here, because there's your answer. You can cover them under FFCRA, emergency sick leave, or any of the above if they have time left, because they're waiting for the test results. The last one on here is, or if the employee's employer, not the second one, if you are requesting such a test or diagnosis, you can now cover. The interesting thing is, it doesn't make it mandatory. My position is, if you're requiring it, it should be mandatory, because that is part of their job function for you to require them to get tested or diagnosed. They are on the clock. That comes in under the old, and we talked about this in April and May, donning and doffing of clothing is what it used to be talked about. That's time. You have to pay that person to put on or take off the clothes that you require them to wear in the factory. This is the same thing. If you're requiring them to stand in line to get tested, or to answer your questions before they're allowed on the premises, or to go get a diagnosis, or to go get a vaccine, you're going to have to pay them. Last one is, or if the employee is obtaining immunization related to COVID or recovering from any injury, disability, illness, or condition related to immunization. So there you go, guys. We've been asked, we've been telling, I've been worried about, well, what's the side effect of immunization? It's not really COVID, but and it's COVID-19, not COVID-10. There is no such thing as COVID-10 here, so sorry about that, including that on here. That's a fail. Let me see, I'm gonna fix it right now so that when it goes up on the website, it's not wrong. So the COVID-19, if you get tested, if you're getting, oh, I see another typo. I got to fix these before you guys even get there. Sorry. Just watch the magic of how this works. There you go. Well, now I messed it up really bad. So anyway, don't do things on the fly. I'm not very good at it. There you go. So the last one on there answers a lot of questions that you all have asked me over the weeks and months of this, which is, immunization or vaccine is not really COVID, but is it covered? And the answer is, if you voluntarily do it, yes. If you don't have to cover it. You don't have to cover for it. However, remember my concern. If you're requiring someone to take this, if you're requiring them to get tested, that becomes work related. If they get sick as a result, I think you're going to be in trouble if you are the one that said, go get vaccinated before you come in, and then they show an illness. Unemployment was extended. We talked about that. The tax credits for FMLEA. If you're caring for a child whose school's been closed due to the pandemic, and then also for the existing sick FFCRA sick leave reasons, and also for testing and immunization. That's all on there for the tax credits if you elect to give it to them. Also, employee retention tax credits were established under the CARES Act. They now continue through, wow, I did this late last night, December 31st, not 21st of 2021. Then there's $200 million allocated to the Department of Labor. This is one you should be concerned about. I'm involved in one right now. This very last one down here. They've now given additional money to the DOL, Solicitor General, Wage and Hour Division, Workers' Compensation, OSHA, Mine Safety Health. They have said start prosecuting and going after businesses. This is a theme under the new administration, and you're going to see some big changes that are on their way. Make sure I didn't skip one. I did. So here's the first one I told you was coming. OSHA. Question was asked at the beginning this morning, where are we with mask mandates for businesses, that it was supposed to come out. It must come out by today. It has not yet come out, but the first part of this is the precursor. A late Friday night, this last Friday, announcement. I said, beware the Ides of March on here because today is the Ides of March. This is bad for businesses. You are now the high focus of OSHA. This is just the beginning. So here's the first one. New initiative has been announced by OSHA. It's called the National Emphasis Program. It targets, literally uses this phrase dozens of times, targeting high-risk businesses, investigating, augmenting. These are their words. This is their exact quote. This National Emphasis Program targets establishments that have workers with increased potential exposure to this hazard, and that puts the largest number of workers at serious risk. In their own phraseology, they said this is intended to clamp down on businesses that fail to follow strict COVID-19 instructions. What does this mean? Wait for the second shoe to drop today, because this will be the national mask mandate in businesses. When they do that and you don't follow it, this National Emphasis Program is what they're going to use to come after you. It also includes strict, very strict anti-retaliation provisions for any business that takes action against anyone that reports their failure to follow any national mandate. It uses phrases repeatedly such as targeting, enhancing, augmenting, targeting. Did I mention targeting? I don't like it when a federal agency starts to talk about targeting businesses and they don't define what a high-risk business is, they don't define what a high-risk industry is, and they don't define what it means to, quote, put the largest number of workers at serious risk. What that means to me is we're getting ready to go after factories, we're getting ready to go after food processing, we're going to go after auto, we're going to go after agriculture, we're going to go after anyone that we want to, because we don't designate what that means. It also says that it prioritizes COVID-19, and it coincides. It should have been a separate bullet, and I apologize, that's where I've messed something up in here. Well, I'm not going to change it. It coincides with the updated interim enforcement response plan, which is a big word for they have until the Ides of March to issue new national mask mandates. That's what's coming out this afternoon, or it may already have been announced. They also said that this is they will also have new workplace emergency temporary standards. That's the other one that I told you was coming out today. So, big changes coming from OSHA. I wish I had more. Friday nights was I wondered how they were going to do this in a phased process, and so they came out with the emphasis program first, then they're going to come out with the national whatever it is that you're going to have to do. It's probably a good time because I didn't put this in as a slide, but I was going to. Texas has gone completely 100% no more COVID. Florida's right behind them, ready to make their announcement, no more COVID, meaning y'all go do what you do. We no longer have any statewide plan. Came across something, I almost included it, but I think it'll be in the next one we do when Kentucky starts to lift, if they ever get to lifting some of our requirements. But I want you to be aware of this, because this is where you're going to see a difference between national and state. You've heard me say the federal government cannot issue a national mandate. They cannot. OSHA, however, has the ability under its general protection rules to require companies to do certain things. So it's like the national mining safety. Miners, they had to come in and they protected the black lung disease, I'm not going to get into what it's called because I'm not good at that. But they did a national mandate for any mines. If you have people exposed to carcinogens, national mandate. If you have people working in chicken processing, you have to wear certain protective clothing. They have the ability to mandate things nationally under OSHA because it's safety. What they're doing right now is they're using the quote, it's Rule 25, but it's called the general duty. Employers have a general duty to protect the health, safety, and welfare of their employees. What you're getting ready to see, and I don't know how this is going to play out, Texas governor has declared COVID is dead. We will not have any more COVID mandates. How does that play out when the OSHA comes out and says national mask mandate for any business, period? The answer is you're going to see fights between state and fed. State law controls. Federal government's supposed to take a back seat. Our federal government's supposed to be a safety net. However, OSHA has the ability under the general rules to mandate additional protections for employees that states did not. What you're going to see is a big blow up nationwide about states' rights versus federal government. And then you're going to have lawsuits because Senior Frogs in San Antonio decides we don't need masks because the governor says we don't need them. But now your employees are at risk because there's a general duty to protect your employees that the federal government has declared that you must wear masks in any business. Now, remember, this is hypothetical. I don't have any information internally yet as to what the government's going to order. But if OSHA says masks are mandated nationwide, then you're going to have a problem with states being able to dictate no masks are required. In any business establishment, in anywhere where anyone could be employed, and I'm thinking even on a beach where somebody's delivering drinks from a hotel. Everybody on the beach has to wear a mask because you have a hotel worker who would be exposed to people on the beach not wearing a mask. It's going to be really bizarre because I don't have the answer until I see whatever it is that they're getting ready to announce later today. But you're seeing the beginning of you will not have autonomy on state rights. You won't have autonomy running your business because now there's a presidential order that says, OSHA, do whatever you need to do to allow me to have a mask mandate because I'm not allowed to do it myself. He didn't say that, but that's what's happening. And you're going to have to comply with all of these or figure out how to comply with them when they don't go together because that's what's getting ready to happen. Next, Department of Labor issued a brand new unemployment mandate. I talked about this a little bit at the beginning of January because actually middle of January, when the brand new executive order was issued. Well, now it's been put into law by the Department of Labor. What we had before was an executive order from the new administration that said anybody who doesn't want to work because of fear of COVID now has the ability to get unemployment benefits. Well, this now brought it into law under the Department of Labor regulations sent to every state for them to utilize for purposes of determining unemployment. February 25th, expanded eligibility provisions for the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. It expanded the CARES Act under the new executive order that I talked about. 3 new bases. Number 1, refuse to return to work that's unsafe. Interesting thing in the executive order was unsafe in the mind of the individual. Not unsafe because something that the employer is actually doing wrong. It literally is, if the employee feels that it's not safe, they don't have to return. They also don't have to accept an offer of new work that they believe in their own mind is unsafe. So welcome to everybody who wants to get unemployment gets it just by simply saying, I didn't feel comfortable. Number 2, certain individuals providing services to educational institutions and educational agencies are now eligible to receive benefits. And number 3, individuals experiencing a reduction in hours of a temporary or a permanent layoff. It applies retroactively to the beginning of the program, although individuals who did not file for the initial pandemic unemployment assistance claim on or before the 27th of December cannot get before December the 6th. States may seek additional funding up to $100,000 to cover startup costs for implementation of the new expanded eligibility provisions. We'll see whether our state unemployment office gets their act together and does that. We'll see. Next one, March 1st. This was asked on Friday of me by people wanting additional information related to the tax benefits. So there is, in fact, for the Employee Earned Retention Tax Credit, new guidance issued on March 1st from the IRS. It confirmed the previous notice regarding this, but it also clarified a couple of retroactive changes. For 2020, the ER credit, Employee Retention Credit, can be claimed by employers who, 1, paid qualified wages after March 12th and before January 1st. Number 2, who experienced a full or partial suspension of operations or a significant decline in gross receipts, and we walked through how you all were required to do that before. And then, of course, the earned retention tax credit is equal to 50% of the qualified wages paid, including qualified health plan expenses, for up to $10,000 per employee. Eligible employees who receive a PPP loan. In the past, we talked about this. You now can claim this for employee retention, but you cannot claim it for the same exact time period. In other words, what that means is if you claimed PPP monies for a particular period of time, don't go claiming the ERTC. Claim it for a different time period for your employees. You can't double dip. 2021, this is IRS Rule 2021-20 addressed the eligible employers. It also addressed full versus partial suspension of operation, what that means. It also addressed what a significant decline in gross receipts means, the maximum amount of the earned or the employee retention, all of the different things, what a qualified wage is, how to claim it, and how to, I should have said how to calculate was the last one on there. That revenue ruling is one you should pull up if you have any questions about it. I don't do taxes, so don't put the quote in the question and ask me the rest of this. The Relief Act also extended and modified the employee tax credit for the first 2 quarters in 2021. And it addressed that the rules only apply, the 2021-20 only apply to 2020. They'll be submitting new guidance for the first 2 quarters in 2021. All right, so the last one is, they also issued a brand new, at the end of February, beginning of March, brand new guidance on flexible spending accounts. I know a lot of you on here are HR related. This is really important because a lot of people had cafeteria plans. You have your health spending accounts, flexible spending accounts, your dependent care assistance plans or DCAP plans. So I wanted to cover this because this is brand spanking new, just came out. So what this basically, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, we're getting ready to move on to the businesses here to cover a lot of things with you, but I had a lot to cover, and I'm sorry. This one was a nightmare to try to figure out what they're trying to do with it. But basically what it is this. A lot of you had people that couldn't spend money last year because of COVID. You know, you may have gym memberships, you may have other types of things people had flexible spending on, and they couldn't spend money on it because of COVID. So what this did is it said, look, we will allow for amendment of plans to allow for carryovers. We'll also extend the grace periods, but you can't do both for the same time period. So you can do one or the other. It's available regardless of whether the plan previously provided for carryover, so you can amend your plan in the middle of the year. You have discretion to limit the dollar amount. So if you're hurting on money, one, this is not mandatory. Two, you can limit this so that people can't just piggyback and kill the business with their health spending accounts. And it also does not affect the amounts may contribute next year. So if you have a 2020 and a 2021, and then in 2022, you allow them to spend $5,000, they can spend the full $5,000 in 2022, and they can also piggyback these into that year if you allow them to do that. It also has interactions with the health savings accounts. You're eligible to make health savings contributions for months covered by the high deductible health plans, but you're not eligible to be covered by a non-high deductible health plan coverage month. If you don't understand any of that, it's very complex. Basically, you have the ability, though, as an employer to take people out of a high deductible, put them into another to make them qualified. There's a whole lot of manipulation you can do with this. If this is something that's important to you, pull 2021-15, take a look at it, read through it, figure it out. A lot of you had year-end spending that had to be done and people just couldn't do it. This is allowing them to basically carry that forward. It's allowing flexibility to you as an employer to try to address some of these things. They're trying to get people back on track with their flexible spending accounts. So then you have one other thing, election changes. There were two things big in there. Number one, usually when you elect coverage or you say I'm going to participate or I'm not, it's irrevocable for the year. Now the employer can permit employees back in, even though it was irrevocable at the time. The other thing is that you have the ability, and I didn't include it in here because it was like this long talking about it. You have the ability to both be on COBRA extended coverage and use your flexible spending account. It got really highly technical, and it was one of those things where that might impact one or two of you. It wasn't worth trying to break it down for a whole other page. So that's it. I don't know what questions are in there. I know Lyle put his mask on. Lyle, it's not a political comment. It's literally, and let me just say, what I'm worried about, my whole thing in doing this is to try to keep businesses in compliance with laws. And honestly, what I see coming is you could be 100% in compliance with a law as a restaurant. That's kind of my benchmark because I'm looking at a restaurant. So a restaurant complies with Texas law that says we no longer have a mask. So they don't have social distancing. They no longer have a mask mandate, and they tell everybody, come into my restaurant, we're open for business. Then they get sued by the employee because under OSHA, there's a general duty to protect the employee, and they've declared that masks have to be worn not only by the employees, but by all of the customers. So now you're going to have employees be able to sue the employer even though they're following state law, and even though OSHA probably is overreaching with this. But it's going to be all of your jobs as HR people to figure out how are we going to comply with the state laws that have come out, the new legislature that's being vetoed by the governor, overridden on a temporary injunction by a judge, and then the federal government's issuing mask mandates across all industries because of a general duty to protect employees. It's really going to get interesting, and honestly, I think that is the very best lead-in to the third part of this show, because having the Keeneland and having this Lexington Center address how they plan on meshing all of this together is going to be interesting to see. So there's your awesome lead in, Lyle.
Sounds like you've gone to the dogs. Yeah, sounds like you've gone to the dogs over there. Yeah, I put my mask on just in honor of your presentation, and it's funny that people picked up on that. You've got some questions you can look through there and start thinking about them, but we've got Kari Collier here. Actually, OSHA is not in my office. In fact, there's almost no one in my office, so I'll take that off for now. Kari Collier is the Director of Human Resources at the Lexington Center Corporation, associated with Rupp Arena. And we've got John Greene. Some of you have heard of Keeneland. In fact, you're probably wondering whether you're going to make it out to the races this year. So let's hear from both of them. Kari, you want to start?
Sure. Thanks, Lyle.
Great.
So Jim, if you'll give me my first slide there. So what you're looking at is 30 days prior to COVID, we had 6 concerts that averaged 12 to 16,000 per event, and 4 UK events, basketball, which had about 20,000 in attendance per game. That's just the 30 days prior. So if I use a conservative number there, that's about 150,000.
OSHA would not be happy.
OSHA would not be happy now. So at that point, head back for just a second. At that point, in most seasonally, I would have anywhere from about 200 full-time and part-time that are statused consistently, and up to 600 on staff that were just seasonal. So next slide. On March 12th, in the middle of Sweet 16, Julian Tackett announced it was canceled after Game 5 of the girls. The boys were supposed to follow the following week. And you see there the fans actually leaving. That was the last time until the middle of November that we had anyone in this building outside of essential staff. At that point, starting July 31st, we actually laid off 52 people. Prior to that, on March 12th, we had 100 that we furloughed. We paid for them for the first month of that furlough, and then we started putting everybody on unemployment because as we started realizing this was going to be much longer than what we had initially anticipated. We had 17 people in the building. That was all that were allowed in from March until about August, September timeframe. Next slide. Since November, we have had 1 concert in January, 2,600 in attendance. You see kind of how sparse our seating is there. And we've had 14 UK basketball games that averaged about 2,000 each in humans, and about, I don't know, 5,000 or so cardboard cutouts. And the attendance total since November has been 37% of just the 4 games the 30 days prior. So you can see we've had a massive drop in our attendance. Our staffing, we're at 65 total roles. Of those, I have 20 that still have not even been returned. So they've been out of work for a year now. We are implementing some things. As you can see, we're starting to have events. So in March, for example, we have another acoustic concert this Friday. The exhibition halls, we've actually continued our construction. That falls under a different bucket of money that has been set aside for construction. So that continued throughout. Our exhibition halls are opening up this next weekend, and we're starting to have events. So for example, the Sweet 16 for the boys and girls will start on the 29th of March and continue through the 10th of April. It'll be much lower on participation and attendance. And I'll talk for just a second, in just a minute, about what we're doing to try to help with that. And Home and Garden is actually coming back in the second weekend in April. So we have some things that are starting. Disney on Ice is coming in. There's things that are happening over in Opera House as well. And if you haven't had a chance, while there's still a little bit of opportunity, go play mini golf over there. It's a lot of fun. They've built a really nice little golf course inside, and you get to see the venue. But we have implemented where all of our employees, when they come in, as most of y'all probably have, temp check. We do mask requirements, sanitation throughout. All of our attendees coming to events have to have the same procedure, temp check, mask. There's seating assignments, so they're 6 feet in all directions. That has been lightened a little bit in the diagonal. So now on a diagonal, you can be less than 6 feet, but front, back, side to side, you still have to be 6 feet. And the state allows us to go up to 25% right now. With the seating capacity that we have, we cannot get to 25%. The best we'll get with the social distancing requirements is about 22%. But everybody who comes in should be wearing a mask. They have to, we're staggering people to go to restrooms, to go to concession stands. Concession stands are opening in broader areas so that we can alleviate some of that line that you would see normally. So y'all come and visit us. Come to one of the events, but come see how you can still have fun and be socially distanced and still have live events in Lexington.
That's great.
Kari, I went to all but a couple, and I hate to admit this now because they were not very well played. But I went to all but a couple of the UK games, and I have to say that it was very well done. The only one that I really was disappointed in had nothing to do with the team. There was one during the time when the governor had no food, no drink, no anything. And that game, I think it was the first and the second game of the year. It was very depressing that you couldn't order anything. All the restaurants downtown were closed. You couldn't park your car. You couldn't have it parked. Everything was just shut down. So it's great to see the progression of the games as well. And I think that one was even before we had the cardboard cutouts, or the majority of them. So it even looked empty.
It did. And, my dog's one of the cardboard cutouts, and I kept checking every day for when they were getting to the point that my dog got put up there. And, but yeah, we had several where we could not have any food service. And we have that same issue at Opera House. So they've tried to bring food in on, like the mini golf type events. But it becomes cumbersome with the social distancing, especially in that building. And in Rupp, I believe we've got it figured out. One of the issues that we're facing, that probably everybody's going to be facing, and you covered it in the stats from a unemployment perspective, is people are getting money from the state to stay at home. And I have that situation. We have that situation at Levy, who is our concessionaire, and their temp services are having the same problem. They cannot get people to come in and work because they get more money to stay at home.
Yep. And that's why I was asked, is this really going to continue where if you add the state, I'm going with the max, which is $552 per week at the state level that you can get max, and you get an additional $300 on top of that. Almost, it's $850 a week that somebody can get to sit at home. It's really hard to convince them to come into a lower paying job. I'm not even saying minimum wage, because if you calculate that out, that's pretty good money for somebody to not work. So it's hard to get people to work. And it's going to become harder.
One of the things that we have done throughout, when we would bring people in piecemeal here and there to work on something for us, is calculate out how many hours we could bring them in and pay them, and then still get enough money from the state to be able to get the Fed money. And my people are pretty good. They know how to figure out when they get a PTO day, when they come off of a coaching, and they also know I can work 16 hours and I can get this amount of money, or I can work 24 hours for you and I still get the state and the Fed, but now the value of that extra 8 hours to you is only $40 and it's not worth the drive for me. So they've actually gotten to the point where they can calculate out what's the most money that they can get. And after that, the return's not there.
Yeah, there are cheap websites where they can literally just plug in their how much they would make versus how much they get from the government, and they can figure out their break even.
Yep, and they do.
Wow. All right, Kari, thank you very much. Any other questions for Kari? All right, let's keep it rolling. John, what's going to happen at Keeneland this spring?
Hey, well, we are slowly getting back to normal. You know, it's ironic. Today is our first day for all Keeneland staff to be back on campus.
Wow.
We have all been in work from home mode, except for those that are on the grounds crews and track crew and otherwise, but all of our office staff have been work from home for probably exactly a year when you get down to it. So that's a big change already. You know, last March was a really surreal time here. We had just about completed all the hiring and the re-onboarding for the spring 20 meet when we announced that the meet would be canceled. So we shifted from onboarding to what I call general offboarding, furlough management, heavy on the alumni relations, as we call it here, of trying to maintain a connection with those that we were left hanging that were expecting to work in April and make sure they come back and be with us in the future. Just to give a little context, a traditional race meet or year, we swell literally from 350 full-time and year-round part-time employees to over 2,200 employees overnight. We were up to that volume. And we typically welcome from 10,000 to 35,000 patrons to the track each day. 2019, last kind of normal year, we hosted over 600 events. From weddings to corporate events, huge to not so big, to a total of 25 that we hosted in 2020. 600 to 25 gives you an idea of the change. So while this spring still isn't going to be normal, it's a huge step forward. We've had massive demand for tickets. In fact, the system crashed within the first couple of hours when we opened it up to the dining rooms on March the 8th. We closed it on March the 13th. All that space is gone. There may be an occasional cancellation because we're allowing the patrons a 48-hour window to cancel with COVID issues in mind, and then we will try to redeploy those tickets. We're expecting roughly 6,200 guests to be on campus for the spring meet. Now, it's still tiny and not a whole lot more than we've had this past fall, but it is a significant improvement. General admission tickets will be limited, but they're going to be going on sale on the 24th, and we expect that to be a crazy free-for-all as well. Doing a few things differently this time, including a $10 concession card, which is one more way to try to minimize the touching of money, touching of hands, using a pre-loaded card that comes with their ticket, and some things to make it kind of interesting, plus offered some meal deals. Temp checks, questions, all of that will remain in place. The bag checks, metal detectors, things of that sort, if you will. And I think some of the things that are really interesting factoids is testing remains a weekly requirement here. For the past year, we spent over $750,000 on tests alone. So that's a pretty shocking number. That's nearly 12,000 tests that we have administered since this all began. We just resumed our most recent round on the 11th. Our employees will be exempt from testing if they can provide proof from the health department or a licensed medical provider that they had and recovered from a previous bout of COVID-19 within 90 days of the race meet. Anything older than that, no exact science on it. 90 days seems to be the best bright line we can find. We're going to go with that, so they could be exempt from testing, and if they're symptom-free, would not have to be tested during the balance of the meet. They also would be exempt if they completed the vaccine series at least 14 days prior to the race meet. If they do it any later than that, that won't qualify as an exemption. And talking about testing, I mean, our jockeys, for example, they have to test negative within 72 hours of the first day they ride. Depending upon what states are coming in, there could be some slightly different protocols as well. Transportation, we're going to look a little bit like a small-time version of Disney World out here. This will be the first time you'll actually see trams, if you think about Disney and Kings Island, where they'll be open air and pulled around versus just our traditional golf carts and enclosed shuttles, which are all at half capacity due to COVID. Dining rooms, sorry folks, but no buffets. It's all a prefix menu, 3-course plated meals, 5-day rotation for that meal plan, if you will. Concessions, 33%, a third of our stands are going to remain closed. I mentioned we'll have the $10 meal voucher. We'll still have burgers, bread pudding, things that people expect at Keeneland barbecue, but there'll be a tremendous emphasis on pre-made and pre-wrapped items. Wagering, less than 25% of our pari-mutuel clerks will be on staff. So a big reduction there from 400 to about 80 that will be here. We've done a lot of things to the facility. One that's interesting, we converted from a traditional wall-mounted time clock. We had, give you an idea of, we have a 1,100 acre campus. We have 42 time clocks mounted throughout this campus. And as a result of going to a phone-based web time clock application, we've gone down to 12. So still a lot of time clocks compared to many facilities, but a huge change for our employees and a lot of education going on and trying to get what tends to be a fairly senior population comfortable with the web-based piece. We've put big ass fans, the cool fans that they've got that have the blue UV light. Those are all over the grandstands and the concourses as well. We've made a huge investment in that. Little things that are, from a culture standpoint, a big deal at Keeneland and tradition standpoint. We always do church services on Sunday. You may not know, but we have a chaplain who is a full-time employee. And this is the first time that we will not have church services on Sundays or at other times. They'll be more involved in kind of philanthropic efforts on a one-off basis. Hand sanitation stations will still be everywhere. The social distancing, queuing markers everywhere. You'll see the folks with the germ guns and continually cleaning high-touch areas. All of our employees will be required to wear masks, as will our patrons be required to wear masks. In our back of house and the kitchens, for example, those will all be N95 disposables, so that we won't have any sanitation issues with those being reworn potentially. And you'll see some of our folks that are working on the gates and out on the track, for example, wearing 3-ply gaiters, just because we found over the fall meet that the traditional mask just was too difficult for those folks to keep in place. The gaiters are a better option. So essentially anybody except for a patron under the age of 12, and that's up to the parent, will be required to have the PPE, if you will. So lots going on. We're thrilled to have racing back. The demand certainly shows the public is, and I think this fall is going to be unbelievable when we hopefully are truly back to normal with vaccines and everything else. So that's what's going on at Keeneland.
All right, good stuff. Thank you very much, John. Any questions for John or Elizabeth or Kari? Please put them in the chat, and we're just going to open the thing up in just a minute. Jim, did you see another question there that you want to respond to?
Yeah, there's one. It was sent privately. I'm going to switch to this so everybody can do this, and then we're going to turn the thing off.
Yeah,
there's one sent privately, so I won't say who it was or anything, but there was a question about people being exempted from testing or quarantine because of the vaccine, and asking if I've seen changing policies for that reason. I didn't cover the CDC today because they're becoming impossible to cover. And I'm going to make a political comment here. The CDC is supposed to be 100% above politics. And what I have seen is that the CDC is anything but. We've seen everything from last March, where we were told nobody needed to wear masks because masks wouldn't change anything, to now everybody should be wearing 2 masks. And the comment made was that the lie was good for the people because they needed to protect as many masks as they could. Well, it created a lot of distrust. Now what I've heard was, and you'll understand why I said it that way. 2 months ago, I told you that it wouldn't matter whether you got a vaccine or not because the CDC said even though you have the vaccine, you could well spread the virus. So you're still going to have to wear a mask regardless, and that they wouldn't be able to verify who did or who didn't have a vaccine. Well, they came out last week and they said everybody who gets vaccinated now doesn't have to wear a mask. And I know that's oversimplification. Don't yell into the screen. But my concern is that everything is changing, and the same thing goes with this exemption from people having to get tested and so on. There's going to be a lot of changes in this national, whatever's coming out today from OSHA is going to be the single largest, if it comes out, the single largest impact on employers that we have had. I don't know what to expect, and I don't know how long it's going to last. And I don't know what the massive impact is going to be on you because every state's going to be different, but then you've got this, quote, general duty clause, Rule 25, where you have a general duty to protect your employees from a known issue. And that's going to impact everybody from Rupp Arena to the Opera House to Keeneland to coming to my law office, everything. And I don't know what the answer is going to be because we're in the dark on what the demand's going to be. But I think you're going to have to really be fluid with your policies. You need to update those. You need to take a look at what you're telling people they have to do versus what they're allowed to do. And then also keep in mind, and this was the single largest chat room comment I was responding to, privately and publicly. You mean people literally just have to say to the unemployment office, I just didn't think it was safe, and they get unemployment? And the answer was yes. That is literally what the president's executive order and now the Department of Labor directive is. So basically what you're going to have is if you don't require everybody to wear a mask and there's a federal mask mandate, all of your employees will go on unemployment. You're going to have to pay for it. This is getting ready to be a very big issue for all of you, and I'm not quite sure what the answer is going to be. So stay tuned. It's going to get more and more interesting as the weeks go on in terms of trying to comply with the ever-changing policies, because these policies literally are being written every day to comply with the brand new executive order that's just been published. So I'm going to put I know I took it down. I did it on purpose so that we can see everybody. I'm going to put the HRCI code and so on into the chat so that you've got them and you can copy them to your heart's content. And there you go, Lyle. I think we've answered everything. If somebody says I missed something, please let me know.